My name is Arthur, and for 15 years, I built a life with Elena on a foundation of what I believed was unwavering trust. We weren't the most passionate couple, but we were partners. We built a successful business together, a chain of boutique hotels from the ground up. We had a beautiful home, a son, Liam, who was 12, and a life that was the envy of our friends. It was a comfortable, well-constructed life. I thought I knew every corner of it. The first crack appeared on a Thursday evening. Elena was working late again. It had become a frequent occurrence ever since we hired Mark as the new general manager for our flagship hotel. He was young, dynamic, and undeniably handsome. I pushed my initial ugly twinge of jealousy aside. I was the one who had interviewed him after all. I trusted my wife's judgment. Liam was at a friend's house for a sleepover. The house was too quiet. I decided to surprise Elena at work, maybe take her out for a late dinner. I drove downtown, the city lights blurring past. I used my key card to enter the executive offices. The floor was dark, save for a sliver of light spilling from under Elena's office door. I felt a smile touch my lips, imagining her reaction. I didn't knock. I pushed the door open, a playful greeting on my lips that died instantly. Elena was at her desk, but she wasn't alone. Mark was standing behind her, his body close, his hand resting on her shoulder. They were both looking at her laptop screen, but the intimacy of the pose was unmistakable. It was the way his thumb gently stroked her collarbone. It was the way she leaned back into him, a posture of complete comfort and familiarity. They sprang apart as if electrocuted. The air in the room crackled with panic. "Arthur, what are you doing here?" Elena's voice was a shrill octave too high. I was just showing Mark the quarterly projections," she stammered, her face flushed. Mark straightened his tie, unable to meet my eyes. "Arthur, good to see you. I was just leaving." He practically fled the office. I stood there, rooted to the spot. The image of his hand on her skin burned into my retina. The comfortable world I inhabited had just tilted on its axis. "Don't, Arthur," Elena said, her voice pleading. "It's nothing. You're reading into things." But I was. I was reading the new, expensive lingerie she'd bought recently. I was reading the sudden interest in fitness, the secretive smiles at her phone. I was reading the late nights that had little to do with work. The seed of doubt, once planted, grew with terrifying speed. I became a ghost in my own life, a silent observer. I started checking our phone bill, a pathetic and demeaning exercise that yielded nothing. They were too clever for that. I began subtly tracking her car using a family locator app we use for Liam. The following Wednesday, while her phone was supposedly at the office, the dot showed her car parked in a residential area across town, an upscale neighborhood of townhouses I had no reason to know. Driven by a cold, furious resolve, I drove there. I parked a block away and watched. An hour later, Elena emerged from a townhouse, smoothing down her hair. She got into her car and drove away. My heart was a block of ice in my chest. I waited. 10 minutes later, the door opened again, and Mark stepped out, locking the door behind him. He got into his own car and drove off in the opposite direction. So this was it, the cliché affair, the business partner, the secret apartment. The betrayal was so profound, it felt like a physical wound. But the historian in me, the builder, needed more than circumstantial evidence. I needed proof. I needed to see it for myself. I hired a private investigator. His name was David, a grizzled man in his 50s with eyes that had seen it all. I gave him the address of the townhouse. "I need to know who owns it," I said, my voice flat, "and I need photographs." 2 days later, David called me back. "The townhouse is owned by an LLC," he said, "a shell company. It's untraceable through normal channels. But I did some digging. The property taxes are paid from a trust. The beneficiary of that trust is your wife, Arthur." The news hit me like a sledgehammer. She didn't just meet him there. She owned it. She was funding their affair with our money, the money we had earned together, built together. The betrayal deepened, becoming financial, becoming calculated. "The photographs?" I asked, my voice a dry rasp. "I've got them," David said, his tone grim. "They're conclusive. Do you want me to email them?" "No," I said quickly. Meet me. I need the hard copies. We met in a quiet corner of a park. The manila envelope felt heavy in my hands, heavy with the weight of my shattered life. I sat on a bench and opened it. The photographs were sharp, high resolution. There was Elena and Mark, laughing as they carried groceries into the townhouse. There they were, kissing passionately in the doorway. And then, the final, devastating blow. A series of photos taken through a telephoto lens into a bedroom window. They were grainy, but the figures were unmistakable. There was no denying the intimacy, the passion that had been absent from my own marriage for years. I felt nauseous. The world swam before my eyes. This was no longer a suspicion. It was a documented reality. I was about to stuff the photos back into the envelope when my eyes caught on one of the earlier shots, the one of them carrying groceries. I had been so focused on their faces, on their body language, that I had missed a crucial detail. In the background, partially obscured by a curtain in the townhouse window, was a small, blurry face, a child's face. My blood ran cold. Liam was at school. It wasn't him. Who was this child? A neighbor's kid? But the townhouses were sleek, modern, occupied by young professionals and childless couples. Why would a child be inside their secret apartment? A new, even more terrifying suspicion began to take root in my mind. A monstrous idea so awful I could barely give it space to breathe. I called David back. I need you to keep watching, I told him, my voice trembling. I need to know about that child.